The following video is created for educational and awareness purposes only. Our goal is to revisit unsolved criminal cases and keep their stories alive, in hopes that renewed attention may one day help bring answers, or even justice. We do not intend to accuse, defame, or spread misinformation about anyone involved. All information is based on publicly available sources and media reports.
It began quietly on a late summer morning in 1972 in the suburban township of Springfield, New Jersey. The kind of place where nothing much seemed to happen. A close-knit community where people left their doors unlocked and trusted their neighbors. But that peace would soon be shattered by one of the strangest and most unsettling discoveries in the town's history. On September 19, 1972, a local resident's dog returned home carrying something in its mouth. At first glance, it looked like an oddly shaped stick or a piece of clothing. But as the dog dropped it at the doorstep, the resident realized with horror that it was a human forearm. Authorities were contacted immediately, and police began searching the nearby area known as the Quarry, a rocky site surrounded by dense woods and steep terrain. After several hours of searching, they came across a decayed human body resting on a cliffside. The remains were soon identified as Jeannette DePalma, a 16-year-old girl who had been missing for 6 weeks.
Jeannette was known among friends and neighbors as a kind, church-going teenager. She attended Jonathan Dayton High School and was remembered as someone with strong faith and a quiet personality. She lived with her parents and sisters, and like most teenagers of her time, she enjoyed hanging out with friends and attending local gatherings. On August 7, 1972, Jeannette told her mother she was heading to visit a friend. She left her home around 3 p.m., but never arrived at her destination. When she didn't return home that evening, her parents grew concerned and contacted local authorities. At first, police treated it as a possible runaway case, a common assumption in the 1970s, especially with teenagers. But her family insisted that wasn't like Jeannette at all. She had no history of rebellion, no romantic conflicts, and no reason to leave. Weeks passed, and with no leads, her disappearance began fading from the headlines, until the dog's gruesome discovery changed everything.
When investigators arrived at the quarry site, they were met with an eerie scene. Jeannette's body was lying on the ground, partially decomposed and surrounded by what some described as a ring of logs and branches. Others claimed there were crosses or wooden sticks arranged around her, though these details would later become the source of much debate. Because of the advanced decomposition, authorities struggled to determine the exact cause of death. No gunshot wounds, stab marks, or blunt force trauma were visible. The medical examiner's report listed the cause of death as undetermined. Toxicology tests were performed, but according to reports, no drugs or poisons were found. Her clothing was intact, and there were no clear signs of sexual assault. This lack of evidence created confusion among investigators, and it opened the door to wild speculation.
By the early 1970s, rumors of witchcraft and satanic cults were spreading across parts of New Jersey. Some local residents believed strange rituals were being held in the woods near Springfield. So when the police found Jeannette's body surrounded by wooden pieces and crosses, whispers of a human sacrifice spread rapidly. Local newspapers at the time ran stories with sensational headlines hinting at occult involvement. Witnesses claimed the site looked like an altar. Others reported hearing chanting and seeing bonfires in the quarry area weeks before her body was found. None of these claims were ever officially confirmed by police. Still, the story took on a life of its own, transforming from a mysterious death into a local legend of ritual murder. Behind the scenes, investigators tried to calm the panic. They maintained that there was no solid evidence of a ritual or cult involvement, but with no leads, the public filled the void with fear and speculation.
Springfield was a deeply religious community at the time. The idea that a young Christian girl could have been killed in a satanic ritual horrified residents. Church groups organized prayer vigils, and preachers warned that evil had come to their town. Some residents even believed Jeannette had been targeted because of her faith, that she may have been trying to help someone involved in the occult and paid the ultimate price. Others suggested she had gotten involved with the wrong crowd, possibly connected to drug users or drifters who frequented the quarry. Theories grew, but facts remained scarce. Detectives continued questioning friends, family members, and witnesses. One friend reported that Jeannette was last seen hitchhiking near the area of Meisel Avenue. Another claimed she was walking toward the quarry that afternoon. But no one ever came forward to confirm giving her a ride, and no one witnessed her entering the quarry alive.
Without a clear cause of death or suspects, the case grew cold quickly. Local police were overwhelmed by rumors and conflicting stories, and the lack of physical evidence made it nearly impossible to build a case. Officers combed the area for clues, searching for any personal items or objects connected to Jeannette. Some reports claimed her purse was never found. Others mentioned strange markings near the scene, though these were likely natural patterns caused by debris. Even though several agencies were involved, including Union County detectives and forensic experts, the investigation reached a standstill within months. The official stance remained: no conclusive evidence of foul play, but circumstances suspicious enough to suggest possible homicide.
For years, the case was discussed in whispers, but rarely revisited publicly. Some journalists later claimed the local authorities and newspapers downplayed or suppressed certain details to prevent panic. In 2005, decades later, reporter Mark Moran and researcher Jesse Polak began reinvestigating the case for Weird NJ magazine. They uncovered old documents, police reports, and witness interviews, many of which contradicted earlier assumptions. Some witnesses claimed police officers themselves had hinted at satanic symbols found at the scene, while others denied any such evidence existed. Even among law enforcement, accounts differed, suggesting either misinformation, confusion, or intentional secrecy.
Decades after Jeannette DePalma's death, many residents of Springfield still remembered the case as a dark, unspoken chapter of their town's history. But for journalists Mark Moran and Jesse Polak, the story was far from over. In the early 2000s, Weird NJ magazine began receiving anonymous letters referencing the DePalma case. Some letters were from former police officers and investigators who had worked on the case. Others came from Springfield locals who claimed to have first-hand knowledge of what really happened. Each letter told a slightly different story, but one thing was consistent: fear.
Several anonymous writers alleged that Jeannette's death was linked to local cults practicing witchcraft and ritual ceremonies in the area. Others suggested the town's leaders and law enforcement knew more than they had admitted, but stayed quiet to protect Springfield's image. One particularly detailed letter described how local teens in the early 1970s would gather in the quarry for drinking, drug use, and occult-style rituals, not true Satanism, but a mix of rebellion and fear of authority. According to this writer, Jeannette may have come across one of these gatherings and been killed to keep her quiet. However, these letters were never verified. There were no names, no physical evidence, and no signed testimonies. Yet the sheer number of these tips showed how deeply the case had embedded itself in local memory, as a story people were still afraid to discuss openly even 30 years later. To understand how the story of Jeannette DePalma became so distorted, it's important to remember the cultural climate of 1972 America. The early 70s were a time of shifting social norms, the rise of youth counterculture, and deep generational tension. The so-called Satanic panic had not yet reached its full height, but fears of witchcraft, cults, and dark rituals were already appearing in local newspapers and small towns. In this atmosphere, any unusual or unexplained death, especially one involving a young, religious girl, could quickly take on supernatural overtones. And because Jeannette's case lacked a clear explanation, the occult theory became a convenient narrative for both media and the public.
At the time of Jeannette's death, forensic science was still decades away from modern DNA testing. Autopsy tools and toxicology screenings were primitive by today's standards. Investigators could not accurately determine if Jeannette had been strangled, smothered, or poisoned, and her body's advanced decomposition made all forms of analysis difficult. Even the evidence collected was minimal: her clothing, a few personal items, and sketches of the crime scene. No photos were ever publicly released. In later interviews, law enforcement officers who had handled the case admitted that many pieces of physical evidence were lost or destroyed over the years. Without those, modern re-examination became almost impossible.
In the mid-2000s, Moran and Pollock attempted to locate the exact site where Jeannette's body had been discovered. They interviewed local residents, quarry workers, and even some of the officers who had participated in the original search. Most of the area had changed drastically. Trees had grown over old paths, and new developments had replaced large portions of the quarry. Still, one local source guided them to a steep wooded area behind the old quarry perimeter that matched the police records' descriptions. The reporters described the site as unsettling and isolated, a place that could easily hide a body without detection. Standing there decades later, they noted how quiet and untouched it still felt, as if the land itself remembered the tragedy.
Springfield's Christian community played a significant role in shaping how the story of Jeannette DePalma was remembered. Many residents viewed her as a symbol of innocence lost, a young believer who may have been killed because of her faith or her attempt to help someone in trouble. Church leaders often referenced her case in sermons as a cautionary tale against spiritual corruption, rebellion, and involvement with the occult. For years, the phrase, "the girl in the quarry," was whispered among locals with a mix of fear and reverence. This religious framing, though well-intentioned, may have also influenced how witnesses recalled events. Over time, personal memories blurred with community mythology, and the facts of the case were buried under moral lessons and supernatural rumors. As journalists revisited the case, several alternative explanations emerged that had nothing to do with the occult. Theory 1: drug-related accident. Some locals believed Jeannette may have gone to meet friends or acquaintances in the quarry to experiment with drugs or alcohol. If she had overdosed accidentally,
Others at the scene might have panicked and staged the setting to look ritualistic before fleeing. This would explain the lack of visible injuries, the arranged objects, and the absence of a clear cause of death.
Theory 2. Local violence. Another theory pointed toward a more personal motive. Jeannette may have been killed by someone she knew, possibly a jealous acquaintance or an unstable friend, and her body left in the quarry to delay discovery. Given the limited forensic work done, it's possible that subtle signs of foul play were missed entirely.
3. The misinterpretation theory. The objects around Jeannette's body, the sticks, the crosses, might have been misinterpreted altogether. Some experts suggested they were natural debris, disturbed by animals or weather, rather than deliberate symbols. If that were the case, then the ritualistic description of the scene could have been an invention of frightened locals and misinformed reporters.
When asked decades later, former officers remained divided on what really happened. Some were adamant that the case involved no occult activity whatsoever, calling the rumors a media exaggeration. Others quietly admitted that something about the scene didn't feel normal. A retired Springfield detective interviewed anonymously in 2006 said, "There were things we saw that weren't in the report. I can't say much, but it wasn't an ordinary death." His statement reignited speculation, though he never clarified what those things were. Officially, Union County authorities continued to list Jeannette's case as unsolved, but not definitively murder. In other words, the state could not prove that she was killed, but could not rule it out either.
One of the strangest aspects of the case is how quickly it disappeared from newspapers after 1972. While the discovery initially made front-page news, coverage faded within weeks. No follow-up articles, no interviews with investigators, and no public updates. This silence led many to believe the case had been intentionally buried, perhaps to protect Springfield's reputation or to avoid reigniting community panic. When Moran and Pollock requested old case files, they discovered that most of the documentation had either been misplaced or destroyed under standard record retention laws. This meant crucial details, such as original witness statements or forensic notes, were lost forever.
As the decades passed, the case of Jeannette DePalma evolved from a local tragedy into a story of mystery, fear, and unanswered questions. By the time the 2000s arrived, it had become a kind of folklore, a chilling reminder of how truth can disappear in the fog of rumor and time. But for researchers like Jesse Pollock and Mark Moran, this wasn't folklore. It was a cold case, one that still had a chance, however small, of being solved.
Through their investigation, Pollock and Moran obtained fragments of old police documents, morgue notes, and internal memos. Some of these records confirmed what was already known. Jeannette's cause of death remained undetermined. However, other details raised new questions. One file mentioned that a hexagram-like symbol had been drawn near the body, though it wasn't clear whether that symbol was natural, drawn by humans, or even part of the original scene. Another report from a separate officer made no mention of symbols at all. The contradictions suggested one of two possibilities. Either multiple investigators had seen different things at different times, or parts of the official record had been altered or lost before they were archived. As Pollock and Moran looked deeper, they noticed a troubling pattern. Over time, nearly all the physical evidence connected to the DePalma case had vanished. Clothing, autopsy photos, even soil samples from the quarry, all gone. In interviews, Police officials explained that older cases were routinely purged to make room for new evidence. But the timing and completeness of the loss raised eyebrows. It was almost as if someone didn't want the case revisited. Without that evidence, modern forensic technology, including DNA profiling, could never be used to test any new leads.
The journalists also tracked down several Springfield residents who had been teenagers in 1972. Some claimed to remember hearing about groups of young people performing rituals in the woods. Others denied it completely, insisting those stories were fabricated after the fact. One woman recalled that her parents forbade her from going near the quarry for months after Jeannette's death. Everyone was scared, she said, but no one really knew what we were scared of. It just became a rule: stay away from the woods. Another local resident, a man who had known Jeannette casually, told reporters that she was a kind girl but curious about spiritual things. However, this claim was not supported by her family or church friends, who said Jeannette was deeply committed to her Christian beliefs and had no interest in the occult. These conflicting recollections further blurred the line between memory and myth.
Sociologists studying the case decades later viewed it as a reflection of moral panic, a phenomenon where fear and rumor create a false sense of evil surrounding unexplained events. In the 1970s, suburban America was facing rapid cultural change, and traditional communities like Springfield often struggled to process it. For many, Jeannette's death symbolized something larger: the loss of innocence, the rise of youth rebellion, and the perceived encroachment of dark spiritual forces in everyday life. This psychological backdrop made it easy for people to accept, even without proof, that something sinister had taken her life. In that sense, the DePalma case became not just an unsolved death, but a mirror of society's fears. Researchers have noted similarities between Jeannette's case and several other unsolved deaths in the region during the same decade. In some, young women were found in wooded or isolated areas with few signs of violence, and their deaths ruled undetermined. One notable case occurred in Summit, New Jersey, only a few miles from Springfield, where another teenage girl vanished under mysterious circumstances in 1974. While no evidence linked the cases, their proximity and shared ambiguity fueled speculation that a serial offender might have been active in the area. Police dismissed these theories, citing lack of evidence and differing crime scene details. Still, the public couldn't help but wonder if Jeannette's case was part of a larger hidden pattern.
In 2015, Pollack and Moran published a comprehensive book titled Death on the Devil's Teeth: The Strange Murder That Shocked Suburban New Jersey. The book reignited public attention and became the definitive modern account of the DePalma case. Through their research, they argued that while the Satanic ritual theory was likely exaggerated, the possibility of homicide remained strong. Jeannette's disappearance, the isolated location of her body, and the community's swift fear response all suggested foul play. Their work also underscored how failures in record-keeping and communication within law enforcement can permanently obscure the truth. By the time technology caught up, the evidence was gone, and with it, the chance for justice. When contacted by journalists in recent years, the Union County Prosecutor's Office acknowledged the case, but stated that there were no active leads and no surviving evidence to re-examine. The official statement read, "The death of Jeannette DePalma remains classified as undetermined. All evidence collected at the time has since been disposed of in accordance with retention policies. Without new physical or testimonial evidence, the case cannot be reopened. This confirmation effectively closed the door on any official reinvestigation. But it also frustrated researchers and locals who believed that even a single surviving item, a piece of clothing, a photograph, a hair sample, could hold the answers through modern forensic techniques.
Today, the DePalma case exists in three primary interpretations. 1. The occult theory, still supported by some locals who lived through the 1970s panic. They argue that Jeannette was the victim of a ritual killing, possibly by individuals practicing witchcraft or satanic rites in the quarry. 2. The accidental death theory. Favored by some law enforcement veterans, this theory suggests that Jeannette accidentally fell or succumbed to natural causes while walking through the rough terrain of the quarry. The arrangement of debris around her body could have been coincidental. 3. The homicide cover-up theory. The most rational, yet disturbing possibility that Jeannette was murdered by someone she knew, and that the occult rumors were used as a smokescreen to distract investigators and the public from a more personal crime.
As the 21st century progressed, the DePalma case became a symbol of how stories evolve over time, how truth, rumor, and fear can blend into something that feels real even when proof is missing. For historians and criminologists, Jeannette's death is less about witchcraft and more about the limitations of investigation in an era before DNA, digital forensics, and cold case units. It is also a reminder of how easily a community's fear can shape the narrative of an entire case.
Between 1973 and 2000, the case was rarely mentioned in official records or news archives. No anniversaries were covered. No follow-up interviews were published. It was as if Jeannette DePalma had simply faded from collective memory. It took a new generation, journalists, internet investigators, and true crime enthusiasts to bring her story back to light. Online forums such as r/unresolved mysteries began to dissect every available detail, analyzing the few photographs, police statements, and forensic notes that survived. Despite the limited evidence, one theme persisted across every discussion. Something about the DePalma case never made sense. From the missing cross necklace to the contradictory reports about the scene, the inconsistencies were too many to ignore. Even if the rumors about satanic symbols were false, the fact remained: a teenage girl vanished in black daylight, and 6 weeks later, her remains were found on a cliff with no clear explanation.
Today, the area once known as the Devil's Teeth looks very different. The old Hudile Quarry is overgrown with trees and brush, the cliff partly eroded by time and weather. Few who hike the area today know its connection to one of New Jersey's most enduring mysteries. Locals who remember the 1970s say the place still feels heavy, quiet even during summer afternoons. For them, the quarry is not just a piece of land. It's a reminder of something unfinished, something unresolved. As one resident once told a reporter, "Every time you drive past the woods, you think of her. It's been decades, but it's like she's still out there, waiting for someone to find what really happened."
The DePalma family maintained their silence for most of the later years. Jeannette's parents, Salvatore and Florence, have since passed away. Her siblings, scattered across the country, have rarely spoken publicly. However, those who did speak described Jeannette as a person of deep faith who wanted to dedicate her life to helping others.
She had planned to attend Bible school, hoping to become a missionary or youth counselor. This image of Jeannette, a young woman devoted to faith, is one of the reasons her case attracted such strong emotional reactions. To some, she became a symbol of innocence caught in the crossfire between belief and superstition.
Even though physical evidence has vanished, some researchers continue to explore alternative ways to test materials indirectly linked to the case. In 2021, investigative advocate Edward Salzano filed a request to the Union County Prosecutor's Office for access to the remaining documents and any biological samples that might still exist. His proposal was simple. If even a few fibers or stains from Jeannette's clothing survived, modern DNA testing could identify foreign material, potentially linking it to known offenders. However, the office replied that no viable samples remain, effectively closing that avenue of inquiry. Still, Salzano and others argue that advances in forensic imaging and soil analysis could someday allow indirect evidence, such as photographs or soil traces, to be reinterpreted forensically. So far, no such project has been approved.
Today, the Justice for Jeannette group continues to operate online, raising awareness through social media, podcasts, and local events. Their stated goals remain clear: reclassify Jeannette's death from suspicious to homicide, push for exhumation and advance DNA testing, advocate for a cold case task force in Union County to reopen similar cases from the 1970s. The group's members emphasize that they are not interested in sensationalism or conspiracy theories, only truth. In one post, a spokesperson wrote, "We don't believe Jeannette's story is about witchcraft or ghosts. It's about a young woman who died under suspicious circumstances and a system that failed to protect her." For them, justice means more than solving a mystery. It means correcting the record of history.
The DePalma case is now regularly cited in documentaries, podcasts, and online crime analysis channels as an example of media influence on investigations. When the newspapers of the early 1970s published their headlines about satanic sacrifice, they weren't reporting verified facts, they were amplifying community fear. In doing so, they may have permanently altered the direction of the investigation. Time that could have been spent interviewing real suspects was instead spent chasing myths about rituals and witchcraft. This pattern of early media speculation shaping public opinion has since become a recognized problem in criminal justice. It reminds modern journalists that the way a story is told can change its outcome.
After decades of debate, experts continue to outline three logical possibilities. First, Jeannette was murdered by someone she knew, possibly a peer or an acquaintance from her social circle. This person may have staged the scene or left her body in a location where discovery would be delayed. Second, she may have died accidentally, a fall, heat exhaustion, or a sudden medical event, and the rumors of a ritual were simply a product of community hysteria. Third, the possibility exists that Jeannette was abducted and killed by a transient offender, perhaps even a serial killer active in the region. The later confessions by Richard Cottingham, the so-called torso killer, cannot be verified, but they add another unsettling dimension to the story. Each theory has some supporting details, but none has ever been proven.
50 years later, the DePalma mystery continues to hold public attention because it highlights fundamental questions about justice and truth. Why do some cases go cold so quickly? How can evidence vanish so completely?
And how do fear and rumor replace fact when answers are missing? For investigators, Jeannette's story serves as a lesson in what happens when community panic overtakes rational inquiry. For her advocates, it's a reminder that every unsolved case represents a real human being, not just a headline or myth.
In 2022, on the 50th anniversary of her death, a memorial service was held near the old Evangel Church in Elizabeth, New Jersey. Family, friends, and community members gathered to light candles and read verses in her memory. The pastor leading the vigil said, "Jeannette's story is not about darkness, it's about the hope that even after 50 years, truth still matters." The words reflected the enduring nature of this mystery and the quiet persistence of those who refuse to let it fade.
Today, the name Jeannette DePalma stands as both a mystery and a message. A mystery because her death has never been solved, and a message because her story warns us what happens when truth becomes tangled in superstition and silence. Whether she died by accident, by violence, or by something yet unknown, one fact remains beyond dispute. Jeannette was a real person, a daughter, a friend, a believer, whose life ended too soon. Her story continues not because of the occult, but because of the unanswered questions that still echo through the quiet woods of Springfield, New Jersey.
If you've watched this far, thank you for joining us on this detailed look into one of New Jersey's most mysterious unsolved deaths. Cases like Jeannette DePalma's remind us that sometimes the truth isn't lost, it's buried beneath decades of silence, waiting to be uncovered. If you want to see more in-depth investigations into real unsolved mysteries, subscribe to the channel, turn on notifications, and explore our full-length case files. Because every story deserves an ending, and every mystery deserves the truth.